Hello. I hope you are having a fabulous day. Today I want to talk a little bit about setting and actions. So the other day we talked about setting and feelings, and we talked about how characters' attitudes and emotions are affected by where they are, just like real people. So take a moment to consider, again, different places that you go in your daily life or where you routinely are. And think about how you act in those places. I bet that you might have noticed or realized that you act differently in different places. You probably act differently at school than you do at home. You might act differently in the kitchen with your parents than you do in your bedroom. You might act differently at one friend's house than you do at another friend's house, right? So people act differently in different situations, and there are different reasons for why. And we can think about this with our characters too. So one reason, because characters' feelings and attitudes are affected by the setting, their actions are too. Our actions are affected by how we feel and what our attitude is towards different things. So, of course, if we feel differently, we may act differently. Same thing for our characters. And then, of course, the atmosphere, time, people, and feelings a character has in a certain place can all affect their actions. Sometimes there are certain rules or expectations in a place. Sometimes around certain people who are usually in one place and not another, people act differently. Sometimes the time of day affects how people act. In the morning, someone may act differently than they do in the evening. The weekend, someone may act differently on a Saturday than they do on a Monday. So there are lots of different things that can affect people's actions, and they're things that we can think about with our characters. So some things to ask yourself. You can ask, well, why did a character do that? Why did the character do that thing? That's always an interesting question to ask. Like, well, why did Susie steal the hairbrush? Or why did this character do this? Why did Ponyboy talk about that poem? Like, we can ask all sorts of things about different stories and different characters, and then we can see, like, is it related to the setting? It might be. We can ask, does this character act differently in this setting than they do in other places? And if so, why? What might make them act differently? So sometimes taking a moment to stop and notice, is my character acting differently in this place than they did in another place? And if so, why? Can be a very interesting thing to consider. And then the last one, is there a certain way people are expected to act or be in this setting that might be influencing the character? So for instance, like school versus home, there are certain expectations for how people act in a school. There may be certain expectations for how people act in your home. There may be certain expectations in lots of different places. Maybe in different classes there are different expectations for how people should act. And so you might act one way in one class and a different way in a different class because the expectations are different, or partially because the expectations are different. So you can think about all these things with your characters. This is a great thing to jot a little bit about. So I jotted a little bit about jam and actions and setting. I know I finished Pet a couple days ago, so I'm probably going to switch to my current read for some of my example jots here soon. But I had decided to go with some jots about jam so we could add it to this document. So I had kind of listed out the settings, so I just decided to do a couple little jots. Obviously, I have finished this book, so these are sort of concluding thoughts. If you're in the middle of a book, this could be much more like something you build on as you keep reading. So one thing I noticed about Jam was that she acts really boldly at the library. She takes charge, she decides what she's going to do, she doesn't let anyone tell her that's, she doesn't let anyone sort of push her around there. She says, here's what we're going to do, and she makes a decision. In the art studio and in her house, however, Jam tends to act a little bit more timidly and anxiously. She still makes decisions, she still does the things she thinks are right, but she tends to go back and forth about them and worry about them, and sort of deal with what am I going to do here and there. So I was kind of thinking about, like, well, why would it be different? And I'm thinking, well, maybe I had said that Jam felt really competent and respected in the library. So maybe she feels more like independent at the library than she does at home, because at home her parents are there and they sort of obviously take care of her and things like that. So she might feel a little bit less independent than she does at home. Than she does at the library. So that might enable her to be more bold there. I'm also thinking that in public, she may feel like she just needs to make a decision, whereas at home, she can kind of sit with her thoughts because it's a little bit of like a safer place. Not that the library isn't safe, but her home is a place where she's allowed to be anxious and worried and sort of make decisions and take time to think about them. So it also could be some of that. So I could have written more about that there. So while you are reading today, really think about actions and setting. Try to get some jots about that in. Yours don't have to look like mine at all. You could have any sort of different jot. You could have a T-chart. You could have all sorts of things. I just did some quick jots for action and setting, which is a great start. All right, guys, have a fabulous day.